So I want to talk about how learning occurs. I think that this is a really important lesson or thought that has that we see, especially today in 2022. It is going. There's some really crazy world events that are going on right now, where um, uh, Russia is trying to occupy the Ukraine, which I don't know the whole story. I'm not going to, talk about that. But I can sort of talk about the learning processes, I think. And I'm going to use an analogy with puppies and dogs that we have. In the way that I used to think about learning, and I think it's like super important. So, if you don't know me, I am Professor Dave Massack. I'm an Associate Professor of Innovation Strategy and Entrepreneurship. I created this whole reciprocity project to give back as much as I possibly can. There's so many people who help me out that I want to pay the favor for to help you out. And I'm going for a walk, so bear with the outside noises. So, one of the things that I used to think is that learning was very much a sort of forced function. That if you sort of provide lessons as a teacher, then things would directly translate into learning efforts, and things would sort of work towards what you're thinking about as the particular teacher. But I've since learned that this is not the case, that it is a mutual process where both parties have to be wanting to cooperate and work together to accomplish things. And if that doesn't happen, there's not much that you can do with what's going on, and it ends up being a little bit of a mess. And part of the reason why I've learned this is, anecdotally from my own experience with puppies. We have dogs in our family almost all the time. We've had them since I was 25. I'm now 42. And our first dog that we got was actually a marriage gift between my wife and I, a little puppy. And I used to think that when I was training, so I did a tremendous amount of training. The dog knew all sorts of tricks and all sorts of different things, sit and lay down, and I can, shoot at it and it'd roll over, and it would do figure eights through my legs, and all of these really wonderful things. Except for it was a really, really poor performing, or just a really naughty dog, I guess, or I would, as I would say, it was a bad dog. It would just get into absolutely everything. It would get into when we had small kids. It would get into our diapers that we would have in our trash. It would eat absolutely everything. It was world renowned in our friends as like, what did Maddie do this time? And family, they would ask every time, and every week there'd be something that it would get into. It ate numerous pairs of glasses. And this was like not just as a puppy, but its whole life. It was like that. So you imagine like Marley and Me, but actually it was a lot worse. If you've ever watched that movie, it was far worse. To give you a funny example is that we took it to puppy lessons, and it did its puppy lessons, came home and it ate its report card. And I'm not lying about that. But what this gets at is, we have this, and I've since sort of changed my beliefs in puppy training. And now what I do is think like, it's just part of our family, and, it just lives as part of who we are, and it'll gradually learn the things that it wants to learn. And, it will sort of, it sort of cooperates with what we're doing. And I've changed how, and we have a new puppy, by the way, and how I'm treating it is that I'm not really doing a lot of training, but just, living as part of our family. And things are going a lot more fun, or it's a lot, I don't know, they're going a lot better in terms of how this goes. And, part of it is the sort of personalities of what you're looking at, personality of the puppies that are there, but also, how you're treating it as a experience, right? So, coming back to learning is that the end outcomes when you're sort of forcing learning and you're forcing somebody to do something is generally not very pleasant. And nobody is in agreement. There's a lot of, pain along the way. Both parties don't necessarily like the process. Everybody is upset. And you really don't get a heck of a lot further than if you let it naturally actually happen. And you let cooperation actually happen at its own pace when people come together at their own pace. And, the thing is that people, the sort of actors that are in the learning process, the sort of two-sided learning process, they might not ever come together, and that is absolutely fine. And that's where you have to be okay with the fact that they might not ever come together, and just wait for that time to actually happen. So witnessing some of the things that are going on right now in the global scale, and I'm not saying, I don't understand the whole story. I'm not a political analyst or anything like that. However, I do know that with forced learning and forced actions, not a heck of a lot of good is going to come from that. I really don't think that there's going to be a very positive outcome from any of this that's going on, other than a lot of human suffering. And this is somewhat clear to me that, and it's human suffering on both sides of that sort of relationship. And it's very clear to me that there's not a lot of positive that's going to come from this. There might be in the long run some sort of, if sort of things work out in the plans that are being laid out, there might be some sort of groundwork laid in terms of, getting some land, for example. You might be able to take over some land. However, the actions that are going to happen is going to be nothing but just grinding, painful human suffering for a long time on both sides, because you need people to cooperate and come together and be willing to be there together. And I think that's the same thing as, I think there's very similar analogies, and I apologize if it sounds sort of crude, but there's a lot of similar analogies with training and learning, and what you see is that you really need both parties to cooperate, because what ends up happening is what ends up happening is when sort of the trainer or the learner is not around, and they're not sort of at the moment where they have it, the incentive and the sort of punishment that's there, and there's not a lot of monitoring, then what will end up happening is that the puppy dog will go do absolutely anything that they want to do, and it's usually not in the interests of anybody that's there. There's actually a whole big theory about this called agency theory. It's made a lot of influence, and I could really see that this is playing out in not a very positive way, and that's part of the problem with that's the complaint in the management literature with agency theory, is that it doesn't sort of explain that component of things when people are not watching. What is called the principal that's supposed to be watching is not there, not paying attention, can't see So what's going to happen is that there's going to be moments when the principal is not going to be paying attention. The agent's going to do things that are in complete disinterest of the principal. And that's very much that's going to happen repeatedly for years to come. And what that's going to equal to is a tremendous amount of human suffering and oppression for a long time. And that's actually the big complaint that people sort of view or think about with agency theory is it doesn't treat people in a very positive light. Although you do need some of this stuff that goes on, monitoring and governance and all that kind of stuff. But ultimately, you still need cooperation, and you need people to come together and realize that there is cooperation there, and you need both people to be willingly participate. There's this thing called selection bias, where people will only join certain organizations and certain groups if they choose to. And those people are somehow different if they actually choose to be part of that relationship. And they somewhat agree upon that relationship. But however, if you sort of do random matching and you force people into these relationships, it doesn't work out as positively as one would think. Now, that last part, I've not seen any literature on that, but that is the presumption that I would assume is that the sort of performance of that cooperating relationship is not actually going to be very good in the long term. So, I want to sort of wrap this up is I don't see this ending in a positive way, and if it does end in a positive way, I don't see the performance of this particular relationship being extraordinarily high performance in any sort of way, in any sort of measure. So I see it actually being very, at best, very mediocre in terms of competitive performance of countries and regions, at very best. And I'm being very positive with this in terms of it being mediocre. I could see it actually being not a great situation going forward for a long time. People have and actors, more generally, actors have their own incentives, they have their own motives, they want to do their own thing. And if they don't come together in a fashion where people actually want to participate, it's not going to work out positively in the long run. So with that's where I want to end it. I know it's crazy time, and I hope that various parties that are involved, I hope that they are okay with retreating and go back to some normalcy. All right, take care and have a wonderful day. Bye.